All right, everybody, buckle up. There's going to be comments, I have no doubt, in the comment section of this clip and also in our live chat. And we're just going to smile and nod as we go through this. But I want to see this because, again, we are committed to looking at games skeptically, not like cynical pricks, but skeptically. We're going to evaluate this. My current stance on AC Shadows is that I haven't seen anything that really gets me particularly excited. And I'm saying that as somebody who has historically really liked Assassin's Creed games. And even AC Odyssey, I thought was pretty impressive as a game, you know, and that's why it was nominated for Game of the Year against like God of War 2018 and Red Dead Redemption 2. Obviously, it didn't beat those games, but it was a very good game for 2018. This is coming from that same specific team, so it's a different team than did Valhalla, which I did not like. I called that a travesty of open world design. And this game is supposedly the first of a new trilogy, but basically a new set of the evolution of Assassin's Creed games of this type. So this is the world trailer where they're going to show a lot of varied environments running seemingly, you know, they say mix of gameplay footage and in-game cinematics captured on PS5 console or PC unless otherwise noted. So they're saying this is how the game actually looks. Gameplay footage and in-game cinematics. That's not in-engine footage. They say in-game cinematics. Okay, so they're saying this is how the game will actually look when it releases. So let's just check it out. You go in the comment section and then there's people freaking out about it, but I never know what's real or what's just outrage over Yasuke stuff. So let's see what it actually looks like. The horse animation looked a little fugly. Oh, but the weather looked good. I'll give them that. This is definitely console footage we're looking at right now. You can tell because look at the raindrops here in just a second. When it zooms in, you see the aliasing? This is PS5 footage for sure. It's me, the samurai. Seasonal system. Yeah, that was cute. I'll give him that. That was cute. And that's it. Gut check. Actually, I might not want to ask that because there's a thing with AC Shadows right now that makes it really hard to evaluate. And this is something that, like, whether you love or hate it, I think you can acknowledge. My stance, even after seeing this, is still like, I've said this before. I don't give, like, the Japanese setting any, like, extra bonus points. I've never been into like feudal Japan. I've never found it particularly interesting or compelling. Ancient Egypt, I'm your guy. Pirates, I'm your guy. If it's a game with any of those, it's like +1, +2 to my score because I just love those settings and I just love it. I eat it up. But Japan doesn't do anything for me. If anything, like I find it kind of actively uninteresting for whatever reason. I don't know why. It's just the way my brain works. So for me, it's just already I'm like, eh. And so when I'm looking at this, like I do think parts and shots of this are graphically really impressive and like the big expansive shots. I do think that looks interesting. But in the context of a video game like this, I want to know, like, okay, well, what are we doing though? It's a beautiful forest, sure, but what do you do in the game that makes this forest worth running through, worth exploring? And, you know, we see this, which presumably is like a parkour challenge. Maybe there's some loot back there or something like that. But even this, it's like, okay, so there's hills and mountains and valleys and stuff. But one of my frustrations with Valhalla is it felt like there were just hills and trees and forests and stuff you'd run through to get to the next city where the interesting thing was. You run through the next one, then you get to the same city that looks pretty much the same. And I just didn't understand what I felt like the world was big, but it wasn't very deep, you know? And so far, I find it interesting that they've marketed this in a very different way than Valhalla. If you remember Valhalla, I think in the reveal trailer, I think they showed some supernatural stuff even in that one. Or Odyssey. Let's do Odyssey instead. I think it's at the end of this where they show Medusa. Yeah. Look at this. Right. Coming up. Right there. Right there. So even in this one, they show Medusa. They show Medusa. So they had supernatural stuff in the game that they showed you right up front. With this game, as far as I'm aware, they haven't shown any supernatural stuff, which makes me wonder if they've really done like a full pivot in tone, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but I do find it really interesting. Because I've debated this with Joraptor, where Joraptor was like, no, there's going to be supernatural stuff, I would think, because they've done that a lot. But like, I still just don't know. Maybe they've made a pivot. Maybe there isn't going to be any supernatural stuff. It's interesting because it just seems to be approached very differently. As for this stuff, they show the seasonal change. You know, they show shots of Yasuke walking in the snow. That's going to be like the big feature of this game, is that you can take on similar encounters in the snow versus in the summer, you know, when it's hot. Weather systems will have an effect and all that. That's absolutely true. But we haven't seen that gameplay in action, and that's where I still am curious. But look at this. This horse animation jumped out to me as a little funky. Just watch the horse's feet. It doesn't seem to move right. It's very quick, and maybe it's just the way that it's captured, but them horse feet are moving kind of weird. I don't know, maybe it's just the angle of the shot, maybe it's the speed of the shot. In motion, it just looks a little weird. Maybe I'm being unreasonable. Because slowed down, it doesn't look bad. I don't know. Slowed down, it doesn't look bad. Maybe it's just in motion it seems off. Because I don't want to be unfair. It's just in motion. Something about it hits my eye weird. Maybe he's just moving too smoothly over rough terrain. Maybe that's why my brain doesn't like it. I don't know. But I do think the whole thing with Shadows, this takes us back to one of the things we've said a lot before, which is it's often perception over reality, okay? If the perception, or in other words, like the perception is the reality you have to deal with. The perception around Shadows right now is very toxic. And I think even the people that are perhaps the most ardently opposed to this and to Yasuke, they would even acknowledge that the discourse and discussion around the game is probably a bit toxic right now. It feels like you can't talk about the game without it being flooded with people that call it like woke garbage, or they call it like Ubi slop, or they'll throw things out like that. Even if we just go down in the comment section, you know, I'm sure there's going to be lots. All right. All right, Ubisoft, you won. I'll play Ghost of Tsushima one more time. Okay, other people are pointing out the horse thing too. So yeah, it's not just me. In an interview, Ubisoft said, "We have to make it so that Japanese people can understand that this is Japan. I'm not satisfied with this in Japan, so please remake it now. Copyright violation is also a crime. Please apologize and compensate those who have been caused trouble, including the gun." I have no idea what they're talking about. Is this a reference to the like banner that was used? I don't know. Yeah, they're talking about like copyright violation. I think that's in reference to the banner, the stock price. Yeah, referencing investors too. It was a movie where you could see that not a single Japanese person was involved. Why is the BGM? What is BGM? Somebody will have to tell me there. I don't know. We wanted to be as authentic to the setting and culture of Japan. That's why we put Chinese music over this trailer and hip hop whenever a black man fights. They have done weird hip hop music whenever Yasuke fights, which I find to be a strange creative choice, to say the very least. If this was not done in a pandering way intentionally, it really comes off as an attempt at pandering when you put hip hop music over a black character. You know, like it just doesn't it doesn't work. BGM is background music. Oh, that's what they mean by BGM. So where was that comment again? Oh, why is the background music Chinese? Also, the trees are so uncanny. Feels like Ubisoft never stepped into rural Japan and used bonsai trees to furnish the backgrounds. Like with a lot of these things, I think to the average casual gamer, I don't think they're going to care that much, honestly, that maybe the trees and fauna are not one-to-one accurate. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm wrong there. But I think for most people, they play through these games and they don't look that closely. I think maybe a miscalculation Ubisoft made was that people who are like stands for Japan and Japanese culture and feudal Japan and find this period really interesting, they are, let's just say, hyper fixated on it. You know, I imagine that it's I don't know if there's crossover with like anime fans or if it's crossover with what, but I think the people that are into Japan that I've known are really into Japan. So I think they might have been playing, you know, with a hot potato, as it were. But I do think some of the critiques are very valid. I don't like the hip hop music whenever Yasuke comes on screen. That to me screams pandering. I find that to be like, I don't know what the justification is, honestly. I thought it was weird when they first revealed the trailer and, you know, it's like Nawe fights and it's all like flutes and whistles and it's, you know, it's very, very in line with what you'd expect. And then Yasuke gets up on screen and it's boo, 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 and it's like, guys, what are we doing? Okay. Like, what are we doing? I think we know what you're doing. We know what you're doing. Don't pretend like we don't. And that's, I think, why people are perhaps most perturbed is because when it's so transparent, it's like, okay, I don't like, you know what you're doing. We know what you're doing, you know? So that's one that's harder to justify in my view. I think if you, I don't know if these trees are accurate to the area and I won't pretend to. And honestly, I personally, as a video gamer, I don't care that much if this particular type of tree is not accurate to this region of Japan. That doesn't really matter to me. If it's a good video game, I can have fun whether the trees are accurate or not. Were all of the trees in AC Valhalla accurate to the region? I have no idea, and I don't particularly care. So I do think that there are some unfair complaints that are being levied as well. Like if you really want to start nitpicking games to that extent, we can do that for a lot of other games too. And I think you might realize that there's, you know, not many games that will hold up to that standard. But I think all of this discourse pretty clearly started from the choice to build the game around Yasuke. And I think it's fascinating that choice, which was probably made like 4, 5, 6 years ago to choose him as one of the protagonists for the game. I think that choice will pretty much determine the public discourse around the game, because it seems like that choice has springboarded a whole group of people online who are committed to finding any little bitty thing with this game and ripping it apart and opening it up. Things like the banner that was copied from like a reenactment troupe or something, that was used in some concept art. That, for I think a lot of games, would be like, oh, yep, yeah, oops. And then it would be a story everybody would forget about. This trailer is flooded with references to that specifically. And so it seems like there's a large number of people who are committed to making sure that no matter how this game actually turns out, that it is torn apart as best they can. And as far as I can tell, most of that starts from Yasuke, and then other things kind of flooded from that, because they feel as though Yasuke's inclusion was intentionally rewritten for the purposes of trying to pander. And then when you see things like, you know, the hip hop music that pops up whenever he fights, it's really hard to argue that was just an organic choice that came about authentically during the music writing process. Like, I think we all know what you're doing there. So I find it fascinating that one choice like this and the way that they've handled the feedback from it instead of just being like, yeah, guys, it's Assassin's Creed. We've never pretended like we're one-to-one historically accurate. We just thought it could be interesting to put an outsider into the culture of Japan and see how they would have reacted and explored, inspired by a historical character, but we've definitely fudged the historical record a lot. If they just said that, I think people would have been like, okay, yep. And they've arrived there now. I think that's now their current approach to defending it. But when they first announced this game, they were trying to say that this was like, he was the first truly, I think they said word for word, they're like, this is the first historical character who's playable in the game. And it's like, you're kind of fudging it so much. It's not even the same guy anymore. You know, there's a lot there. But it's just, it's a debate that frankly didn't even need to happen, which I think is my broader point. If they had just had a samurai that they invented like Nawe, just a character that they came up with and wrote specifically for this game, just like, you know, having Cassandra versus Alexios. If they just had that, I don't think any of this would have ever come up. And people would just be like, yep, it's another Assassin's Creed game. It's just fascinating to me. It's really, really fascinating to me. But it basically could determine the outcome of this game, which probably cost anywhere from $300 to $500 million when all was said and done. You know, it's crazy. I think at the end of the day, based on what I'm seeing here, it looks like a step forward for the Anvil engine. I think some of the skin and lighting and cinematics for Odyssey, I think still look almost better, personally. But I don't think this looks bad at all. I think some of the stuff with like these nature shots, you can tell are running on console with like FSR upscaling in the trees in the distance. I don't think it's bad. It's about in line with what we've seen with other open world games, but shots like this look really good. Lots of detail packed into it, and I think that looks fine. I still don't really know what we're doing in the open world. I still don't really know what exploration looks like. I don't know how much of an RPG this is compared to Odyssey. I don't know what direction they're going. Are they going more open world adventure, less RPG? Are they going more RPG, less adventure? I just don't know, because we still, again, have not really seen much of the gameplay of this. But so I don't think what they show here specifically, if this were any other game, I think people would look at this and be like, yeah, it looks pretty good. But in the context of Ubisoft, with the context of how they've handled Yasuke and all this stuff, I can understand why some people might be a little more towards it. My stance after this is still like, yeah, looks like a fine open world game set in Japan. It doesn't look like anything particularly remarkable to me personally, if we look at it just in a vacuum. Within the context of everything else, I can understand why people might be a little less stoked about it. But a lot of these things and these comments, I think, they mix like some very fair critiques, and then there's a lot of trolling too. And it's just really hard to get a finger on the pulse of how fans actually feel. Because Assassin's Creed is a huge franchise. You know, Valhalla sold tens of millions of copies. But if you listen to the discourse online, you would not think it sold tens of millions of copies. I think like 20 million roughly. And that's because the people that play Assassin's Creed are in their bubble, and the people who hate on Ubisoft are in their bubble. And there's not much interaction between the two. And if you're ever interested, like, go to channels that are dedicated to covering Assassin's Creed, and you will see that they're actually relatively optimistic and positive about Shadows. But if you go over to, like, I don't know, an Asmongold video or something, people might be a lot less optimistic, let's say, to say the very least, about Shadows. And I think a lot of that is because Shadows, specifically in this case, has gotten caught up more so than usual Ubisoft games. It's gotten caught up in this like culture war with debates about, you know, woke decisions in gaming, activist participation in gaming, pandering in gaming versus just focusing on what makes the best game first and foremost. And I think that's why this is such a hot potato. Whether it affects final sales, we don't really know. Right now, according to, I think it was Insider Gaming, pre-orders are actually pretty good internally for Ubisoft. So they're not even like openly saying it publicly, but according to leaks from inside Ubisoft, pre-orders are pretty good. Now, if I recall correctly, they also said similar things about Star Wars Outlaws, that pre-orders were like pretty good. And that game ended up missing sales targets and not performing to their expectations. So this might also be in a similar spot. But what I do think is almost certain at this point, I think without a doubt, there will be fewer people, fewer YouTubers covering AC Shadows than covered Valhalla. And because of that, I think you're going to see a big drop in what's called like earned media. So, or earned marketing, it depends kind of how you frame it. But basically with any project, with any game, with any movie, anything, you have a certain amount of, potential marketing for a game. Like impressions is how you could maybe track this or whatever else. You have a certain amount that you pay for, okay? So you spend $50 million marketing your game. That's what this amount is. Your hope is that YouTubers, TikTokers, streamers, people that you're not paying will then come in and do what's called earned media, which is just media and coverage and discussion over your product or service or whatever that you didn't have to pay for, that just was earned based purely on the hype or excitement, whatever else. So you think of something like Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2, this chart would look much more like total marketing excitement would be like, they spent very, very little. And then the earned media or the free stuff they didn't have to pay for was all the rest of this. Just TikTokers, YouTubers, streamers, everybody just talking about it with their friends. Everybody was super, super into this based on word of mouth. And they barely had to market it at all. You flip it around and you look at something like Immortals of Aveum, which was like also a huge, big budget game. They spent a ton of money on marketing. Like, so much money on marketing, okay? Just using the big rush for this. So much. And the earned media was almost non-existent. All paid, and it didn't really do anything. With Assassin's Creed Shadows, what I think is almost certain is that if Odyssey was more like this, like half paid, half earned, YouTubers were covering it, streamers were covering it, people were playing it, gets nominated for Game of the Year, that helps it sell some more, and half of it is earned, half is paid. I think Shadows is going to be much more like this, because I've already seen it. I've talked to other creators who were like, yeah, I was expecting to cover Shadows a lot on my channel now, like for this year, but the comment section, the discourse around the game is so toxic, I don't even want to bother. So I'm just not going to make the videos on it. And as a result, you're seeing far fewer people make videos on it. And that is going to be the thing that actually could impact sales. Assassin's Creed fans, I don't think are that worried about Yasuke. I think they're used to Ubisoft characters and writing and kind of reworking the historical stuff. So I don't think that will turn them away. But what I do think will potentially turn them away is just the lack of excitement and discourse in the community, because people just don't want to deal with the toxicity that comes in with it. So I think that is going to affect it. Even toxic talk is earned media. Yeah, but it's still earned media. But I'm also not a believer within marketing a product that all press is good press. I don't buy that. I think Concord is a great example. Just because lots of people were talking about it did not mean that people were playing it. Did not mean that people were buying it. That did not translate. They had a lot of earned media. It just was all negative and it didn't help them at all. So I think that this is going to affect it. My gut, I think Joraptor, I think in our podcast, was saying that he expects this to sell maybe a little bit worse than Valhalla, but still very, very well. I don't know, because I haven't tried the game. I haven't seen it. I don't know exactly how the game is. But if the public sentiment remains like this and the discourse remains this toxic, I think that basically no YouTubers are going to be talking about it. Nobody's going to be covering it except for the most dedicated channels. And as a result, you're going to see probably less overall marketing and discussion over it. Valhalla popped off, but I think Valhalla popped off because people were really excited to finally have like a big open world RPG kind of game where they could play as a Viking. And that was something that was basically never served in that way up until that point. And with this, I think a lot of people just feel like we've already gotten a really good Assassin's Creed similar game in Japan, and that was Ghost of Tsushima. And so this game comes along and might be okay, might be bad, might be good. We just don't know yet. But it just hasn't, there's nothing that's really blown anybody away so far, I think. We'll see how it plays out. I think it's important for us to all maintain, again, a skeptical outlook instead of a cynical outlook. I understand some people might just approach it cynically because they feel like it's been proven to their satisfaction that this is a game built around like pandering to like outside investors for whatever special funds from BlackRock, whatever. Maybe that is the case, and if that's been proven to your satisfaction, I can at least understand why you'd approach this cynically, and there's not really anything they could do to win you over or win you back or whatever. But I do think that there's a large number of people out there who are just Assassin's Creed fans who are going to buy this no matter what and are just not going to engage with the comments, you know, in the YouTube comment section. Like, you know, you can see 1K upvotes, 2K upvotes, 1K upvotes, 500 upvotes and stuff. If you scroll down, you start to hit like 2,000 upvote comments on people saying like, oh, it looks good, or 4,000 people thinking that it looks awesome. Anyway, we'll keep looking at it. We'll keep following it. As of right now, just looking at it as a video game, I still am like, because I liked Odyssey. I didn't like Valhalla. This looks to me much more in line with Valhalla than it does to Odyssey, which to me is like an active turn off, because I'm not that into the Japanese setting to begin with. So I'll keep an eye on it. I'm just as of right now, yeah, but we'll see. He took my thing.